Have you ever looked at your dog? I mean, maybe they're sitting right there next to you right now, staring up at you with those big, soulful eyes, and wondered what they would say if they could suddenly, miraculously speak.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the ultimate pet owner's thought experiment, right?
Yeah.
We usually just imagine they'd ask for an extra treat or, complain about the mail carrier.
Yeah, exactly. But what if, instead of asking for a belly rub, your dog sat you down and just delivered this biting 400-year-old critique of human hypocrisy?
That would be a totally different ballgame.
It really would. What if your dog actually possessed a deeper understanding of institutional corruption and, well, the failures of the justice system and the moral decay of society than most modern sociologists?
I mean, it would certainly complicate your morning walk, that's for sure.
It really would. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a foundational text of Western literature. We're talking about Miguel de Cervantes' text from 1613, El Coloquio de los Perros, or The Dialogue of the Dogs.
Right, and we're pulling from some really comprehensive literary analyses today to break down why this relatively short story, I mean, it's only about 70 pages, carries the narrative and philosophical weight of a massive 1,000-page novel.
Yeah, it's wild how much he packs in there.
It really is. Cervantes managed to concentrate an astonishing multiplicity of genres, linguistic registers, and, philosophical inquiries into a space so compact it almost defies logic. It's basically a masterclass in literary efficiency.
So let's set the scene for everyone, because the setup itself is just brilliant. This story doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It actually lives within a framing device from another interconnected story by Cervantes called The Deceitful Marriage.
Exactly. And our setting here is the Hospital of the Resurrection in the city of Valladolid, Spain.
And we should probably clarify what kind of hospital this was, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's an institution primarily dealing with infectious diseases, specifically syphilis, actually. Yeah. So we have this soldier, Campuzano, who is recovering from the consequences of a highly deceptive marriage. He's feverish, sweating profusely in his hospital bed, locked in this dark, miserable environment of human decay.
Right, he's lying there in this fever state, and he hears voices right outside his window.
Yeah.
But it's not the hospital staff, it's two dogs.
Two mastiffs, yeah.
Yeah, two mastiffs belonging to the hospital named Cipión and Berganza. And they have somehow magically gained the ability to speak and reason.
The contrast Cervantes establishes here is just vital. Inside the hospital, you have the literal result of human deception and moral failure, and then outside, you have these two animals who have been granted this incredible gift of rational discourse.
It's such a striking image.
It is. The soldier, representing humanity's flaws, basically becomes the ultimate eavesdropper on a conversation about human nature, but it's being delivered by beasts.
And the dogs are entirely aware of how impossible this is. They start their conversation by, actively questioning their own reality.
Right, because they recognize the defining Renaissance philosophical boundary, which is that humans are rational animals and beasts are irrational, yet here they are having a perfectly logical conversation.
It's like they're having an existential crisis right out of the gate.
Basically, yeah. And because they are acutely aware that this anomaly might just vanish by morning, they establish a pact. They know they need to use this time strategically.
So Berganza proposes that he's going to tell the story of his life tonight, tracing his whole journey from master to master. And then, if they can still speak the next night, Cipión will tell his story.
It's a ticking clock scenario, but it's really the dynamic between the two of them that drives the entire narrative. Berganza is the storyteller who has been through the meat grinder of life. Quite literally, as we'll see.
Yeah, he has the raw, lived experience.
Exactly. And Cipión, conversely, takes on the role of the editor, the literary critic, and the moral compass. As we'll see throughout the text, he continuously guides Berganza, stops his tangents, and critiques the very construction of the narrative itself.
And that dynamic is exactly why we're diving into a 17th century fable about talking dogs today, because this text essentially laid the groundwork for modern literature.
It really did.
Cervantes uses this canine perspective to dissect social inequality and the darkest parts of human nature in ways that, frankly, remain shockingly relevant to the world you and I navigate today.
It operates as a miniaturization of all of Cervantes' wisdom, exploring the crisis of identity and institutional failure centuries before those concepts were formally named by sociologists.
So to really understand how radical Cervantes was being here, let's look at the beginning of Berganza's life. Because in the early 1600s, the literary market was totally flooded with these pastoral romances, right?
Oh, completely. Highly idealized stories about beautiful shepherds singing poetry in lush, pristine meadows.
Right. So where does Cervantes choose to have our protagonist born? Not in a meadow. He is born in a slaughterhouse in Seville.
The Matadero. It is the absolute antithesis of a pastoral paradise. Cervantes is essentially dragging the reader out of their literary escapism and plunging them into visceral, bloody reality.
And Seville was a major hub back then, wasn't it?
Huge. Seville at the time was the economic heart of the Spanish Empire. It was a booming port city flush with wealth from the Americas. But beneath that wealth was a really violent, brutal underbelly.
And the slaughterhouse is the epicenter of that underbelly. I mean, Berganza's puppyhood is just a total immersion into casual, normalized violence.
Yeah. The butchers, the Huferos, are described as men who operate completely outside the bounds of conscience. They consider themselves above the law.
They'd kill a human being over a trivial dispute just as easily as they'd butcher a cow.
Exactly. And they run a highly organized syndicate of theft within the slaughterhouse itself. They skim the best cuts of meat before the owners ever even see the carcasses.
And the owners just let it happen.
Well, they're aware of the corruption, but they are essentially held hostage by their own workforce. They tolerate the localized theft just to keep the butchers from looting the entire operation.
That is wild. So Berganza is socialized in an environment where theft and violence are just the standard operating procedures?
Right, and his first master is a butcher named Nicholas the Pug-Nosed who actually trains Berganza to be an accomplice.
This part is crazy. Nicholas has a mistress, and to spare her the indignity of visiting the bloody slaughterhouse, he trains Berganza to carry a basket of stolen meat in his mouth to her house every single morning.
Berganza becomes a highly trained cog in a corrupt machine, but this setup leads to a profound psychological test for him.
Yes, because one morning while he's carrying the meat, Berganza hears a woman calling him from a window. And she is incredibly beautiful, immaculately dressed.
Very high status, seemingly.
Exactly. She comes down to the street, and Berganza approaches her. She reaches into his basket, takes the high-quality stolen meat, and replaces it with an old, dirty shoe.
It's a completely humiliating theft. But notice Berganza's internal reaction here.
Right, he really wrestles with it. He realizes he could easily bite her and fight to get the meat back, but he explicitly chooses not to.
Why?
Because she is so beautiful and pristine, and he feels his mouth, which is stained by the slaughterhouse, shouldn't touch her clean hands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he defers to her aesthetics even as she literally robs him blind.
This is a total masterstroke by Cervantes. Berganza experiences this irrational deference to perceived class and beauty. It highlights a recurring theme that dominates the novel, which is that appearances are aggressively deceptive.
The beauty is just a mask.
Exactly. The woman's beauty serves as a mask for her thievery. The societal expectation that high status equates to high morality is immediately shattered here.
And the immediate consequence for Berganza is terrifying, because he knows exactly what Nicholas the Pug-Nosed will do when he sees a shoe instead of an empty basket.
He'll assume Berganza ate the meat.
Right, and kill him on the spot. So when Berganza sees Nicholas draw his knife, he doesn't even hesitate. He turns and flees the urban nightmare of Seville, running deep into the countryside.
He is seeking refuge in the natural world, operating under the assumption that moving away from the city means moving away from corruption.
So he finds a flock of sheep, and the shepherds take him in. They put a spiked steel collar around his neck, name him Barcino, and give him a job.
And initially, Berganza is ecstatic about this.
He is, because he has heard humans back in the city reading those pastoral romances. He expects his new life to involve shepherds playing lutes and singing verses about the goddess Diana.
Right, he enters the countryside armed with literary illusions. He expects the rural world to operate like a poem.
But the reality check is brutal. He quickly observes that his shepherds don't play lutes. They smash their wooden crooks together and make terrible noises.
And they certainly don't sing elegant poetry. They grunt vulgar songs. They spend their downtime picking fleas off themselves and mending their shoes.
Cervantes is just systematically dismantling the romantic illusions of his era here, isn't he?
Absolutely. He forces the reader to confront the fact that the literature they consume is a sanitized fantasy written for idle aristocrats. The actual working class is exhausted, dirty, and entirely unpoetic.
And the delusion turns deadly when it comes to his actual job, which is protecting the sheep from wolves.
Right, the core duty of a sheepdog.
Whenever the shepherds raise the alarm, screaming, "Wolf!" Berganza acts with total dedication. He scours the valleys, tears up his paws in the brambles, searching for the predator. But he never finds one.
Never.
Yet when he returns to the camp, there is invariably a dead sheep with his throat torn out. And then the owner arrives, berates the shepherds for their carelessness, and then literally beats the dogs for failing their duty.
It's awful. Berganza is being physically punished for a systemic failure he doesn't even understand yet. He is executing the role perfectly, but the flock still dies.
So he applies his rationality. One night, when the alarm sounds, instead of running into the dark, he hides in the brush near the camp.
And what does he see?
He watches as two of his own shepherds grab a prize ram, slit its throat, and butcher it in a specific way to mimic a wolf attack.
The protectors are the predators.
Yes. I really want to look at this through a modern lens for a second, because for anyone listening, this is textbook regulatory capture.
Oh, completely.
It's the classic scenario where the people hired to guard the vault are the ones orchestrating the robbery. They kill the sheep, eat the best cuts, present the mangled skin to the owner as proof of an external threat, and then let the dogs take the physical beating.
It completely shatters Berganza's worldview. He asks himself this really devastating question. He says, who can remedy this wickedness? Who can make it known that the defense offends, the sentinels sleep, trust steals, and the one who guards you kills you?
The one who guards you kills you. I mean, that is heavy. How do we interpret Cervantes' intent here? Is he making a broader philosophical point about the nature of authority?
Oh, absolutely. Cervantes is highlighting that the domestic internal threat is infinitely more dangerous than the wild external one.
Like a literal wolf is just nature doing its thing.
Exactly. A literal wolf is a manageable fear. It's an expected part of the ecosystem. But a corrupt shepherd represents an internal rot that destroys the institution from the inside out.
That makes total sense.
Society requires trust to function, but trusting the wrong people is lethal. Berganza realizes that exposing the shepherds will just result in his own death. The system is so deeply compromised that doing the right thing is basically suicidal. His only option is to flee once again.
It's a profound realization. Escaping the literal butchers of the city only brought him to the metaphorical butchers of the countryside.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Right.
Yeah.
So he decides to return to civilization, hoping that the educated, structured world will offer some kind of moral baseline. But the corruption simply changes his wardrobe.
Yeah, the shift from rural back to urban doesn't eliminate the rot. It merely refines its sophistication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he ends up back in Seville and finds a master who is an incredibly wealthy merchant. And this merchant has two young sons attending a prestigious Jesuit school.
And the text provides a really fascinating detail about this merchant. He walks around town dressed very modestly, employing only one servant for himself. But he dresses his children like absolute royalty.
Oh yeah, he sends them to school in litters surrounded by pages. It's so over the top.
It is, but it's a razor-sharp sociological observation by Cervantes. The merchant class in 17th century Seville operated under really complex psychological pressures.
How so?
Well, they often concealed their immense personal wealth to avoid the scrutiny of the Inquisition or just the envy of the nobility. However, human vanity always requires an outlet, right? So their ambition bursts forth, as the text notes, through their children.
Ah, I see. The kids become the avatars of the parents' suppressed social climbing.
Exactly.
So Berganza figures out how to integrate into this performance of status. Remembering his days carrying the meat basket, he begins carrying the students' vademecum, their heavy satchel of books, in his mouth.
And he walks them to school and basically becomes a local sensation.
The students treat him like a beloved mascot. They feed him constantly.
He enters a phase he actually describes as virtue and pleasure. He sits at the door of the classroom, absorbing the environment. He watches the Jesuit priests teaching with genuine patience and guiding the children toward intellectual and moral development.
So for a fleeting moment, Berganza encounters an institution that actually functions exactly as it's supposed to.
Yes, but of course the sanctuary doesn't last.
Right. The teachers notice that the students are spending the half hour between classes playing with the dog rather than studying. So they apply a concept the text refers to as reason of state.
They tell the merchant he must keep the dog at home for the greater good of the student's education.
Explain that concept a bit more, the reason of state.
Sure. Reason of state is a Machiavellian political concept where the preservation of the institution supersedes any individual interests. The school must maintain order, so the dog has to be banished.
And the resulting psychological whiplash is brutal for him. Berganza goes from an intellectually stimulating, free, well-fed existence right back to being chained up on a short leash behind a door, fed only scraps.
And Cervantes uses this transition to point out a deep psychological reality. Berganza reflects that continuous misery forms a callus. You simply learn to endure it.
Right, you get used to it.
But being suddenly elevated to a state of happiness and prosperity, only to be abruptly plunged back into your previous despair, that contrast inflicts a pain so rigorous it can almost kill you.
The memory of happiness becomes a weapon.
Beautifully put, yes.
While he is chained behind this door, suffering this mental anguish, he faces his next major moral test. There's an enslaved black woman working in the household, and she's having a secret affair with an enslaved black man who sleeps in the outer vestibule.
And to meet him at night, she has to walk right past Berganza.
Right. And as a guard dog, his fundamental instinct and duty is to bark.
So she initiates a system of bribery. Every night, she brings him pieces of meat and cheese to buy his silence.
And Berganza experiences a massive crisis of conscience here. He knows he's compromising his integrity, but he is starving. He explicitly states that gifts are powerful things.
It's a micro-study in the mechanics of compromised ethics. Even Berganza, who desperately wants to be an honorable dog, finds his moral compass warping under the gravity of physical necessity. It really raises the question of whether morality is just a luxury of the well-fed.
He takes the bribes for a while, but eventually his inherent sense of duty wins out. He decides the corruption just has to end.
So what does he do?
One dark night, instead of accepting the meat, he attacks her. He doesn't bite her skin, but he fiercely tears her clothes and scratches her, forcing her to retreat and fake an illness for a week.
He reclaims his integrity, but in Cervantes' universe, virtuous acts are rarely rewarded.
Oh, never. The woman seeks immediate lethal revenge. When she recovers, she prepares a horrific trap. She fries a sponge in fat and attempts to feed it to him.
And we should probably explain the mechanics of this trap because it is particularly cruel.
It is so nasty. Please explain it.
So, a dog is attracted to the smell of the fat and swallows the sponge whole. Once inside the stomach, the sponge absorbs the gastric fluids, expands massively, and causes an agonizing, inescapable death.
Ugh, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
But Berganza recognizes the trap instantly. Realizing he cannot survive in an environment where he is actively being hunted, he breaks his chain and flees back into the streets of Seville.
And almost immediately, he runs into an old acquaintance of the violent butcher from the slaughterhouse, an alguacil, a constable.
So we are moving from the subtle household corruption of the merchant's home into the highly organized, systemic corruption of state power.
Exactly. The constable recognizes Berganza as a tough dog and recruits him. And the scam this constable runs alongside his friend, who is a supposedly respectable scribe or notary, is incredibly elaborate.
These two officers of the law are essentially running a massive extortion racket.
It's a classic Badger game, utilizing state authority as the ultimate leverage.
They use two prostitutes as bait. One is specifically named Colindres. These women dress to appear highly respectable, but subtly available, and they specifically target wealthy foreigners arriving in the port.
Like the visiting Breton mentioned in the text.
Exactly. When a foreigner takes the bait and accompanies Colindres to a rented room, the trap snaps shut.
Colindres gives a prearranged signal, and the constable, the scribe, and Berganza just kick the door down.
And the constable puts on an absolute masterclass of theatrical moral outrage. He arrests them for gross immorality, threatens to throw the foreigner in the most notorious dungeon in Seville, creates this huge, terrifying scene.
And the foreigner, utterly panicked and desperate to avoid a public scandal that could ruin his business, begs to pay a massive fine right on the spot.
Yep. The constable accepts the bribe, the foreigner flees, and the prostitute splits the profits before heading back out to find the next target.
It is the complete weaponization of the justice system. The law is no longer a tool for maintaining social order. It is merely a mechanism for personal enrichment. The enforcers of morality are its greatest violators.
And during the specific sting involving the Breton, Cervantes injects this brilliant moment of physical comedy.
The ham incident.
The ham. The Breton had hidden his money in the pockets of his pants, which he had taken off. While the constable and the Breton are screaming at each other, Berganza smells something.
He sniffs the pants.
Right, he discovers a high-quality piece of ham hidden in the pocket, grabs the pants in his mouth, sneaks outside and peacefully eats the ham in the street while the humans inside just argue over stolen gold.
It perfectly distills the absurdity of human conflict. The humans are engaged in this complex, high-stakes battle over abstract concepts of wealth, legality, and fake morality. And the dog bypasses the abstraction entirely and just acts on pure instinctual reality.
Food is food.
Exactly.
But the scams grow even more sophisticated. Berganza details an operation involving a stolen horse from the town of Antequera.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
Thieves bring a beautiful stolen horse to Seville, but they can't sell it without raising suspicion. So they use the constable to launder the title.
And the way they manage the legal laundering is so clever. Explain how they did it.
Okay, so one thief goes to the constable and claims the other thief owes him a massive debt, producing a forged promissory note. The constable legally seizes the horse as collateral for this fake debt and puts it up for public auction.
Right.
A third accomplice buys the horse for a fraction of its true value at the auction. Now, the thieves possess a legal receipt of sale issued by the city government, giving them a clean title to sell the horse anywhere for its full price.
It is a stunningly modern financial crime. They are utilizing the legal apparatus of the state to legitimize stolen property.
And the ultimate irony is that the constable's own greed ruins him in the end.
Oh yeah, he outsmarts himself.
He wants the horse for himself, so he secretly funds the proxy buyer. He rides it around Seville, showing off his newly acquired wealth. But the actual original owner from Antequera happens to be visiting Seville, recognizes his stolen horse, provides undeniable proof of ownership, and reclaims the animal.
So the constable loses the horse, the money he paid for it, and his public dignity.
The apex predator is outmaneuvered by the very system he thought he controlled.
It's perfect poetic justice.
Look at this entire sequence of Berganza's life. The justice system is nothing but a performance. The dog, the literal animal, is the only entity attempting to enforce actual justice.
Right, like when the constable orders Berganza to attack a supposed thief fleeing down the street.
Yes, Berganza realizes the thief is actually just an innocent man the constable wants to mug. So instead of attacking the target, Berganza turns and attacks his own master, tearing his clothes and biting him.
He physically rebels against the corruption. But as Berganza is enthusiastically recounting these intricate tales of extortion and hypocrisy, we see Cipión step in again to fulfill his role as the literary editor.
Cipión interrupts the narrative. He doesn't just listen to the gossip. He aggressively pushes back against Berganza's tone.
He constantly warns Berganza against the danger of murmuring. And in the context of 17th century Spain, murmuring meant malicious gossiping, spreading rumors, or speaking ill of others just to tear them down.
It's like toxic gossip.
Exactly. Cipión identifies a profound psychological trap. Individuals who constantly point out the flaws in everyone else are usually using that critique to mask their own vices.
Cipión tells Berganza, "You are canonizing the cursed plague of murmuring, giving it the name of philosophy." I just love that line.
It's so good.
If we look for a modern parallel, Cipión is essentially functioning like a content moderator dealing with internet troll culture.
Oh, that's an excellent analogy.
He's calling out the people who tear down institutions and individuals online under the guise of just asking questions or providing critical commentary, when in reality, they're just spreading toxic cynicism.
Cervantes is providing a meta-commentary on the nature of satire here. How does a writer expose systemic corruption without merely becoming a cynical gossip?
Right. How do you punch up without just throwing mud?
Exactly. Cipión demands that literature serve a higher purpose. The critique must remain focused on the structural flaws of society rather than descending into personal malicious attacks.
This philosophical debate transitions us into a radically different phase of Berganza's journey. Leaving the corrupt state power of the constable behind, Berganza enters a world where deception isn't just a financial hustle. It becomes highly theatrical and even supernatural.
We plunge into the realm of the grotesque. The narrative shifts away from urban realism and begins exploring the terrifying edges of human psychology and belief.
Berganza joins a company of soldiers and falls under the control of a drummer. And this drummer recognizes Berganza's immense intelligence and immediately commodifies it.
He teaches Berganza an intricate routine of tricks and begins marketing him as the wise dog.
He builds a complete theatrical persona designed to exploit the public's fascination with the unnatural.
And the performances are wild. He charges people to watch Berganza drink a measure of wine without spilling a drop, jump over hoops on specific cues, and even dance the zarabanda.
Tell us about the Zarabanda, because that's significant, isn't it?
Very. The inclusion of the Zarabanda is highly intentional by Cervantes. At the time, the Zarabanda was a wildly popular but heavily censored dance, originating from Moorish and New World influences.
Why was it censored?
It was characterized by fast, highly sensual, provocative movements. Having a dog perform a dance that the Catholic Church deemed morally corrupt is a sharp satirical jab at the society's misplaced moral panics.
That's hilarious. The entire performance relies on making the audience believe the dog truly comprehends complex human ideas. And the theatricality works, well, a little too well.
Yeah, backfires.
During a performance in the town of Montilla, the drummer commands Berganza to jump through a hoop for the famous witch that they say lived in this place.
Just as a local joke.
Right. But immediately, an old, wretched woman in the hospital courtyard where they are performing stops the show. She starts screaming at the drummer, calling him a charlatan.
The drummer's cheap theatrical trick accidentally struck a very real nerve of local superstition and dark history.
Because that night, the old woman seeks Berganza out in the shadows. She is a hospital worker by day, but her true identity is Cañizares, an infamous witch.
And she pulls Berganza into her dark room and delivers a revelation that completely fractures the premise of the story.
She claims that she knew his mother, a powerful witch named Montiela, and she tells Berganza that a rival witch named Camacha turned Berganza and his brother into dogs at birth out of professional jealousy.
It is a staggering narrative pivot. Cervantes forces us to question the fundamental reality of the text. Is Berganza an animal granted the miraculous ability to speak, or is he a human being trapped inside the physical form of a beast by dark magic?
Before she delivers the prophecy on how to break the curse, Cervantes gives us a physical description of Cañizares that is absolutely haunting. The detail is relentless.
It is a defining example of the aesthetic of the grotesque, pushed to its absolute limits.
She is described as an anatomy of bones wrapped in black, hairy, leathery skin. Her belly hangs down to her thighs like a deflated sack. Her lips are blackened, her teeth are missing, her nose is hooked down to her chin, and her eyes are deeply sunken.
The visceral bodily decay is just shocking.
It really is. It's hard to read.
And we have to place this in literary history. This level of unflinching, crude physical reality predates the 19th century naturalism movement, the kind of hyper-realistic, often grotesque descriptions you'd see in the works of Émile Zola by hundreds of years.
So Cervantes was way ahead of his time.
Way ahead. He isn't just trying to scare the reader with a cartoon villain. He is explicitly linking her physical decay to her moral decay. The outer grotesque is a perfect manifestation of her inner rot.
While locked in this decaying form, she gives Berganza a prophecy. She says the curse will be broken and he will return to his human form when the mighty are brought low and the lowly raised up by a powerful hand.
It sounds like a sweeping, epic, biblical prophecy.
But let's pause and really think about that for a second. The mighty will fall, the lowly will rise. That isn't sophisticated condition, that's just a description of the basic churn of history.
Right, it happens all the time.
It applies to empires, politicians, the stock market. It sounds like a totally generic horoscope.
And Cipión completely agrees with you. When Berganza recounts this dramatic prophecy, Cipión immediately interrupts to apply rational analysis to the supernatural claim.
He is having none of it.
None. He completely deflates the epic tension by arguing that the prophecy is meaningless if interpreted literally or politically. Instead, Cipión says it's simply a metaphor for a game of bolos or bowling.
Wait, what? A bowling alley? That blew my mind.
I know.
He takes this terrifying supernatural curse and says, no, she's literally just describing a bowling alley.
Exactly. In a game of bolos, you use a powerful hand to knock down the standing pins the mighty, and then you raise up the fallen pins the lowly to play again. Cipión uses extreme, grounded rationalism to instantly puncture the terrifying balloon of superstition.
It's so funny. But the text pushes even deeper into the psychology of this superstition. Cañizares isn't just deceiving others, she is deceiving herself.
She admits to Berganza that she isn't entirely sure if her witchcraft is even real.
She describes the mechanics of her rituals. She strips naked, covers herself from head to toe in a foul-smelling ointment, and falls into a deeply catatonic trance on the cold floor.
And we really have to ask what these ointments were made of, because she essentially admits they might just be drugs.
What were they?
They almost certainly were drugs. The flying ointments used by supposed witches during this period often contain highly psychoactive and toxic nightshades, belladonna, henbane, mandrake. Yeah, these substances, absorbed through the skin, cause severe hallucinations, a sensation of flying, and complete detachment from reality. Cañizares admits she doesn't know if her soul actually leaves her body to attend demonic sabbaths, or if the ointments simply trap her in terrifying drug-induced hallucinations while her body remains frozen.
So she is trapped in a prison of her own delusion. Whether the devil is physically real or the hallucinogens are just incredibly potent, the outcome is the same. She is spiritually destroyed.
And she knows it. She exhibits a devastating level of self-awareness.
She does. She tells Berganza that she works in the hospital by day, playing the role of a pious, humble servant. She says, "I pray little, and in public I murmur much, and in secret it goes better for me being a hypocrite than an open sinner."
She explicitly recognizes that fake holiness harms no one but the one practicing it. She understands she's damned, but the habit of her vice is so deeply ingrained that she cannot stop. The institution of the hospital gives her the perfect cover for her internal darkness.
Berganza flees this terrifying hallucinatory encounter, seeking an escape from the madness of the witch. But he inevitably lands in an environment where the delusion is no longer individual, it is societal. He arrives at a hospital filled with madmen.
He trades the supernatural delusion of Montilla for the institutionalized intellectual delusions of the era.
Before reaching the hospital, though, he briefly lives with an incredibly bad poet. And this poet is pouring his soul into writing an entirely absurd play about the Pope and 12 purple cardinals.
And he's obsessively fixated on the wardrobe.
Yes. The poet is obsessed with a liturgical rule called the mutatio caberum, which dictated the specific dates when cardinals switched from wearing red robes to purple robes.
He focuses entirely on ensuring the purple dye of the costumes is historically accurate, completely ignoring the fact that the actual dialogue of his play is, as the text suggests, so terrible it must have been written by Satan himself.
And the poet is literally starving to death while he writes this. He eats moldy crusts of bread, carefully counts out exactly 20 raisins for his meal, and tosses the crumbs to Berganza.
Cervantes is satirizing the artist who becomes entirely disconnected from human reality. The poet is dying of malnutrition, yet he spends his intellectual energy obsessing over the minutiae of papal wardrobe in a play that no theatrical company will ever perform.
He prioritizes hollow technical accuracy over artistic truth.
Precisely.
And when the poet finally reads his masterpiece to a theater troupe, the actors literally chase him out of the building. So Berganza finally abandons the theater world and arrives at the Hospital of the Resurrection.
The very same hospital where he and Cipión are having this conversation outside the window of the feverish soldier.
Full circle. And inside this hospital, Berganza overhears a conversation among 4 specific patients whose specific forms of madness perfectly encapsulate the systemic failures of 17th century Spain.
The 4 men are an alchemist, a mathematician, a poet, and an arbitrista. Let's look at the mechanics of their delusions because they're fascinating.
Let's do it. The alchemist complains that he is a mere 2 months away from discovering the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that turns lead into gold. But he is trapped in the hospital because he ran out of funding to buy the necessary raw materials.
He represents the delusion of achieving infinite wealth through magical shortcuts, bypassing actual labor.
Right. Then, the mathematician is furious because he has spent 22 years trying to solve the geometric problem of squaring the circle. He claims he gets so close he can almost put the solution in his pocket, but then it mathematically slips through his fingers.
The delusion of achieving absolute intellectual conquest over an inherently impossible reality.
Then we have this second poet, not the playwright, but another patient who is complaining that he has written a massive epic poem in esdrújula verse without using a single verb. But he can't find a wealthy prince smart enough to sponsor him.
Let's unpack why that is so absurd.
Please do.
Esdrújula verse requires the stress to fall on the antepenultimate, the third to last syllable of the word. In Spanish, this is highly restrictive and creates a very specific, almost galloping rhythm.
But without verbs.
Exactly. To write a massive poem without using any verbs. Verbs are the engine of action. Without them, the poem is just a stagnant, lifeless list of nouns and adjectives. It's an incredibly difficult technical gimmick that results in completely dead art.
That sounds agonizing to read. But the absolute climax of this sequence, the delusion that feels the most violently relevant today, belongs to the arbitrista.
To understand the arbitrista, we really have to look at the massive paradox of the Spanish economy at the time.
Right, an arbitrista was a specific type of amateur economist or projector who would draft wild, unsolicited proposals arbitrios and send them to the king, promising to fix the national debt.
And what was happening to the economy that created these guys?
Spain was the most powerful empire on earth, pulling literal fleets of silver and gold out of the Americas. Yet the state was constantly declaring bankruptcy.
Because the influx of silver caused massive inflation, destroying domestic industries. Furthermore, the Habsburg monarchs were fighting endless, ruinously expensive religious and territorial wars across Europe.
The wealth was hemorrhaging out of the country faster than the galleons could bring it in.
Right, so the arbitristas emerged as a class of desperate grifters, pitching magical spreadsheets to solve deep systemic collapse.
And this specific arbitrista in the hospital has a plan that is breathtaking in its arrogance. His pitch to the king is to legally mandate that every single person in Spain between the ages of 14 and 60 must fast.
Just forced starvation.
Yep. Once a month, they're restricted to only bread and water, and whatever money they would have spent that day on meat, fruit, wine, and olive oil must be handed over to the royal treasury.
He runs the numbers, right?
He does. He says with 3 million people participating, the king will generate millions of reales a month, eliminating the national debt in 20 years. Plus, he argues, it's a win-win because forced fasting will improve the public's spiritual and physical health.
It is a stunning display of administrative delusion. He believes he can fix a collapsing global empire by forcibly restricting the caloric intake of the working class.
Listening to this guy pitch his tax plan feels identical to listening to modern internet hustle culture. It's the exact same tone as bad political pundits or tech bros pitching unworkable life hacks to solve massive structural inequality.
Oh, absolutely.
If you just stop buying avocado toast and cancel your streaming service, we can fix the macroeconomic housing crisis. It's the exact same energy.
It is the exact same psychological mechanism. Cervantes is mocking the systemic reliance on quick fixes that completely ignore the root causes of decay. All four of these madmen, the alchemist, the mathematician, the poet, and the arbitrista, are seeking a miraculous shortcut to glory, wealth, or knowledge.
They want the reward without doing the agonizing, grounded work required to sustain society.
And Cipión points out the ultimate crushing irony of their grand designs.
Despite their promises of infinite gold, perfect geometry, flawless art, and unlimited tax revenue, all four of these men are currently dying in a public charity hospital for the destitute.
Which brings us to the profound meta-literary achievement of this text. When we step back and view the dialogue as a whole, Cipión is far more than just a canine therapist listening to Berganza's trauma. Cipión represents literary form itself.
Throughout the entire night, Cipión is actively shaping the story. He stops Berganza when he loses the plot. He criticizes the pacing. He forces him to evaluate his tone.
Cervantes isn't merely delivering a narrative, he is actively conducting a masterclass on how to construct literature.
And he achieves this through polysemy, right?
Yes, polysemy, the capacity for a single text to operate simultaneously on multiple layers of meaning. You can read the dialogue of the dogs purely as a comedic, picaresque tale about a clever animal trying to survive.
Or you can peel back a layer and read it as a savage, structural critique of 17th century Spanish institutions.
Or you can read it at its deepest level, as a philosophical inquiry into the nature of truth, the mechanics of deception, and the absolute limits of human rationality. Cervantes identified the exploitation of the vulnerable and the rot within the justice system centuries before we developed the sociological vocabulary to define them.
And he managed to condense all of that insight into 70 pages. The scope of Berganza's journey is just staggering. In the span of a single night's conversation, this dog has dragged us through the bloody, normalized violence of the urban slaughterhouse.
He exposed hypocrisy and regulatory capture of the supposedly pure countryside.
He walked us through the vain, performance-obsessed merchant class and dismantled the extortion rackets operating under the guise of state law enforcement.
He navigated the psychological terror, hypocrisy, and hallucinatory delusions of the witches in Montilla before finally arriving at the absolute apex of societal failure among the intellectuals and economists locked in the hospital.
He lived the entirety of human failure in a single canine lifetime. And that brings us to the core takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive.
True literature, the kind that remains vital and dangerous after 400 years, isn't just a sequence of plot points.
It functions as a mirror, a highly polished mirror reflecting our structural flaws, the daily hypocrisies we normalize, and the beautiful, terrible complexity of the human condition.
Cervantes forces us to look into that mirror, and he achieves it by shifting the perspective. He makes us view our society through the eyes of the ultimate outsider, a stray dog who exists at the margins, watching us precisely when we assume our actions are hidden.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to carry with you. As the sun begins to rise over the hospital in Valladolid, and the miraculous gift of their speech threatens to evaporate with the dawn, Cipión tells Berganza to look down at his paws.
He tells him to ground himself in reality, to remember that despite their night of profound philosophical discourse, he is ultimately just an irrational animal.
But after listening to this dog surgically dissect the greed, the vanity, the systemic delusions, and the institutional corruption of the human world, ask yourself this the next time you look at your own dog resting across the room. Who are the truly irrational animals? The beasts who act purely on their instincts for survival, or the humans who possess the capacity for reason, yet utilize it to build massive, intricate institutions purely for the purpose of exploiting one another?